The morning sun on Kepler-4 2b rose in hues of burnt orange and dusky crimson, painting the sky in soft strokes of otherworldly color. The colony of New Denver shimmered beneath it, a patchwork of silver domes nestled against the scarlet rock. Plains, metallic surfaces reflected the red sky like mirrors tilted toward a distant memory of Earth. Wind skimmed the ground with a whisper, rustling the low, imported grasses that lined the colony walkways. It was a peaceful day, the kind that lulled people into forgetting they lived on a planet 1,200 light-years from the cradle of humanity. Lisa Carter stood just outside the school dome, her black work jacket half-zipped against the dry morning breeze. Her daughters, Amy and Sophie, had already broken free of her grip, their laughter echoing down the polished walkway. They raced each other toward the building's entrance, their boots clapping against the composite panels, cheeks flushed with the excitement only 8-year-olds could sustain before breakfast. "Slow down," Lisa called after them, one hand shading her eyes against the light. "You've got plenty of time." The girls turned briefly to flash her matching grins before vanishing into the crowd of other children and parents. Lisa smiled and lingered a moment, watching the dome doors hiss open and shut. She didn't know why, but something inside her tightened unexpectedly. She shook it off. First shift wasn't going to wait. She turned and made her way through the colony, passing food vendors, hydroponic towers, and miners just finishing the night cycle. The scent of brewed algae coffee filled the air outside the commissary. Drones zipped overhead, ferrying supplies between domes. Everything functioned with clockwork rhythm. Kepler 442b was not Earth, but it had become something real, something human. This was home. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood near the entrance to the hospital dome, arms folded, observing the world in its quiet hum. 10 years ago, she had been among the first to step onto this red soil. Now she was the colony's anchor, the calm in every emergency, the first call in every crisis. This morning, thankfully, there was no crisis. Just a miner with a sprained wrist, a technician with flu symptoms, and a child who had decided that eating a nutrient crystal whole was a brilliant idea. Elena sipped her tea and felt a rare sense of peace settle over her. In the defense dome, Captain Roy Phillips sipped stronger coffee and scanned the local traffic logs with a soldier's detachment. The screen showed nothing unusual: civilian traffic in and out of orbit, a scheduled cargo hauler arriving from Mars Base Theta, and local atmospheric monitoring drones reporting a standard readout. He leaned back, allowing himself a moment of relaxation. Still, a sliver of instinct nagged at him, quiet but persistent. He ran another sweep, just to be sure that the console blinked. Not unusual. Probably a solar flare anomaly, but then it blinked again. Multiple signals, small, far, moving too fast. Phillips frowned. His hand paused over the control panel, then moved with sharper precision. He magnified the readings, overlaid identification patterns, and sent a passive scan ping. No return codes. His coffee suddenly tasted cold. Across the colony, the air remained still. Birds chirped from the environmental speakers near the botanical dome. Children laughed in classrooms. Lovers strolled under the glowing street lamps that lined the artificial parks. No one noticed the specks on the screen, specks that moved like shadows from deep space. No one but Phillips, and he didn't like what he saw, not one bit. The first siren caught no one's attention. It began as a distant, rising tone echoing across the outer domes, a warning that had always signaled false alarms or atmospheric disturbances. Nothing urgent. Nothing real. But then came the second, and the third. Then every siren in New Denver roared in perfect unison, shrieking across the silver rooftops with a sound so primal and violent it shattered the illusion of safety in a single breath. Red emergency strobes flared to life, Bathing the streets and corridors in alternating waves of crimson panic. Lisa Carter was halfway to the communications center when the first alarm hit. She froze. The tone was wrong. Not a drill, not maintenance. She knew this signal, had trained for it, theoretically. A Category 1 planetary breach. She turned sharply, heart thundering, eyes wide. The school. She spun and ran. Across the colony, the seamless routine shattered like glass. Children screamed. People dropped their tools, spilled drinks, abandoned conversations mid-sentence. Shops were deserted. Transit pods halted mid-route. The colony-wide broadcast system buzzed to life, but no voice came. Only static. Then came the voice of Captain Roy Phillips, grainy but unmistakable. "This is New Denver Defense Control," he barked, voice straining with urgency. "We are under attack. Repeat, unidentified vessels have entered the system. All civilians proceed to designated shelter domes immediately. This is not a drill." At that exact moment, the sky opened out high above the colony. Clouds parted not from wind, but from the gravitational distortion of massive vessels punching into normal space. 50 of them hulking, organic shapes that rippled like muscles under skin, their translucent surfaces throbbing with internal light and movement. Living ships. Things that breathed and pulsed and reeked of purpose. On the main defense screen, Captain Phillips stared in stunned silence. He had seen combat before: orbital pirates, corporate skirmishes, even the Terran separatist riots back on Mars, but nothing like this. These ships weren't just alien. They were wrong. Grown, not built, and huge. Each one was larger than any vessel humanity had ever launched. He transmitted on all frequencies. "You are entering sovereign human space. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." No reply. Just a bright flash of energy as the lead ship fired. The first orbital platform, a 20-megaton defense satellite, vanished in a sunburst of white light. Then the second platform detonated. Then the third. On-screen, red indicators multiplied as the colony's orbital defense grid was annihilated in seconds. Philip stood straight. His face turned to stone. "All stations," he said into the voice unwavering. "Enemy has fired. Defense platforms lost. Emergency protocols are in effect. Evacuate. Get our people underground. Get them safe." In the corridors of the education dome, teachers screamed at children to move. Holographic displays on the walls switched from lessons to flashing shelter maps. Amy and Sophie Carter held hands, their laughter gone, their small faces pale in the red glow of the emergency lights. "Where's Mommy?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. "She's coming," Amy said, trying to be brave. "She promised." But Lisa was 3 blocks away, sprinting through panicked crowds, shoving past people in every direction. She didn't feel the pain in her legs or the scratch of the dust against her skin. All she saw was fire on the horizon. The school dome, her daughter's, smoke rising. Inside the colony hospital, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already moving. Medical teams guided patients to stretchers, grabbing oxygen tanks, medkits, and portable defibrillators. The underground medical shelter was 3 levels down, reinforced against quakes and radiation storms. But could it survive this? "They came to erase us," she muttered under her breath as she injected a sedative into a screaming miner with burns, not conquer, erase. The first alien ships entered the atmosphere with a thunderous wail. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt in the bones, in the air pressure, in the tremble of the ground. Great black shadows passed over the domes, blocking out the red sky. The creatures that emerged from them were monstrous. Tall insectoid warriors with hardened chitin plates, glistening mandibles, and elongated limbs that clicked and flexed with calculated grace. They moved in squads, covering ground quickly, weapons fused to their forearms fleshy, twitching launchers that fired living ammunition, acidic slugs that screamed as they flew, burrowed and tore. They made no demands, offered no warning. Every building was a target, every human an obstacle. One squad reached the education dome. It was already burning by the time Lisa Carter came into view. She screamed her daughter's names as she ran toward the flames, firing her emergency beacon to every channel. In the defense dome, Roy Phillips stood his ground even as the walls shook from above. He activated the emergency beacon, a quantum transmission designed for wartime. It would leap across light years, bypassing relay points, piercing deep into human space. "This is New Denver to Terran High Command," he transmitted. "We are under attack by unknown alien forces. They are not responding to communication. They are exterminating us. This is not an invasion. This is genocide." The wall behind him exploded. He didn't flinch. "To whoever hears this," he said to his last technician as fire roared into the room, "tell them what happened here. Tell them the aliens showed no mercy." The screen went black, but the signal traveled on. Far across the stars, Admiral Charles Bennett was drinking coffee on Luna Base when the alert flashed across his terminal. He read the message once, then again, then a third time. 50,000 dead. Children burned alive. No warning, no declaration, just fire. He stood, placed his mug down with precise finality, and spoke 4 words that would change the fate of the galaxy. "Get me the Council." For 6 hours there was silence. Across the 200 worlds of human space, the transmission from New Denver pulsed through the quantum network like a ghost scream. There were no live visuals at first, only telemetry, energy readings, defense grid, termination logs, life signs going dark in real time. Then came the audio distorted by static, pierced with screams, and then came the video. They had recorded everything. The quantum beacon sent fragments of the colony's last moments helmet, cams, street feeds, internal surveillance. A mother running through fire, a child screaming beneath a collapsing dome. A final message from a dying soldier staring into the camera with unwavering eyes. To Admiral Charles Bennett. The message arrived as he reviewed Starship deployment charts. In his command office on Luna Base, the alert chimed softly. He tapped the interface without urgency, expecting the usual logistical update. Then he saw the words, "Emergency Priority Alpha New Denver Lost Mass Casualties Category, Genocide." The Admiral's breath caught. He straightened in his chair, stared at the screen, then tapped for full report access. The system hesitated for a fraction of a second, a security lag due to the sensitivity level, and then it opened, and the screams began. He watched it all. He watched the colony die. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. His aides found him standing behind his desk, fists clenched, face unreadable. The coffee on his desk had gone cold. His voice was low when he spoke, but no one in the room missed the command behind it. "Get me the War Council, now." 3 hours later, in a subterranean vault beneath the Martian crust, the Terran High Command convened for an emergency session, the first of its kind since the Omega Uprising 97 years prior. Screens glowed with red data. Faces were grim. Every general, admiral, and intelligence director who mattered was present. Bennett stood at the center of the circular chamber. On a central holopad, the footage played again. Amy and Sophie Carter, holding hands in the school dome as shadows fell. Captain Roy Phillips transmitting as fire consumed the sky. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, wrapping a child's head in gauze by flashlight in the shelter, whispering comfort into the dark. 50,000 lives. Gone. General Patricia Stone of Special Operations, A woman with eyes like cold steel and a voice used to ending wars stood next. They went after the defense grid first, she said, her fingers tapping through diagrams, then moved to ground. Coordinated, surgical, no looting, no prisoners. They came to kill. Every dome, every structure, every human. She tapped the holopad. This was a sterilization protocol. Director Kevin Walsh of Terran Intelligence activated a second projection. Alien bioships appeared twisting forms, with translucent hulls and pulsing organs. We've been tracking these creatures for 2 years, Walsh said, his voice dry with shame. Cody name, Zephrian Hegemony, 12-star system empire. Expansionist, highly aggressive. No successful diplomacy on record. They enslave compliant species, exterminate resistors. He paused. They never contacted us. They just attacked. Silence fell over the room, thick and dangerous. President Maria Santis, linked in via secure channel from Earth, stared into the feed with eyes ringed in red. I've watched the footage, she said. I've heard the cries of dying children. 50,000 civilians gone. No warning, no chance. What do we call this? Genocide, Bennett replied. And what is our response? Bennett didn't blink. Total war. No one objected. Within hours, every major human power had received the order. The civilian government authorized full mobilization. Defense budgets were scrapped. There was no need to count costs now. The dead of New Denver had purchased humanity's wrath with their lives. Across Luna Base, planetary fleets lit up with new orders. On Titan, Europa, Ganymede, and Earth, ships began prepping for launch. Civilian vessels were refitted. Orbital. Yards were transformed into war factories overnight. On Titan, Commander Nick Taylor stood in the arming bay of Special Operations Command, locking the last magnetic plate of his stealth armor into place. His Team Ghost squadron assembled. Around him, 12 soldiers, elite, modified, volunteers, trained to disappear into enemy territory and return with blood and data. General Stone appeared on the secure feed. You're going in first. Commander, she said. Find survivors. Find weaknesses. Map every strength they have. She hesitated for a beat. And if you find the aliens who did this, use any means necessary. Yes, ma'am, Taylor said. We'll make them remember. At Terran Research Command, Dr. Sam Turner was already 6 hours into reactivation protocols for experimental weapons. A quarter-century of black-budget tech, locked away for fear of misuse, was now being greenlit for immediate combat deployment. Turner's teams raced to ready quantum displacement drives, zero-point plasma cannons, neural disruptors, nanobot. Swarms and antimatter charges so unstable they'd been declared unusable in peacetime. We're not in peacetime anymore, Turner said, eyes fixed on New Denver's last transmission. They wanted war. Let's give them science they'll never understand. Meanwhile, in orbit above Titan's Forge, the largest industrial world in the Sol system, Claire Brooks stepped into the command center of Shipyard 9. Normally, she oversaw the production of cargo freighters. Today, those orders had changed. We're on full military conversion, the military logistics officer told her. You'll be building warships from now on, maximum output. No limit on materials. What's your ceiling? Brooks looked him in the eye. We don't have one anymore. Everywhere, across every sector, something shifted. It was more than orders, more than strategy. It was resolve. Something ancient stirring in the soul of a species that had once built cities on the edge of extinction, that had outlived plagues and fire and the void itself. The Zephrians had touched that old part of humanity, the part that did not forgive. In the War Council chamber, Bennett watched the tactical map of the galaxy fill with new trajectories fleets forming. Operations planned, weapons prepped. He placed both hands on the edge of the halotable and spoke not to the room, but to the echo of the fallen. "This is for New Denver," he said. "This is for every family they murdered. And this time we will not wait. We will not hesitate. We will not show mercy." Across human space, the word spread. Operation Nightfall was officially in motion. A nightmare was awakening, and it wore a human face. The stars above Titan shimmered with cold, distant indifference. But below, deep in the molten heart of the Saturnian moon, humanity was roaring awake. In the megafoundries of Titan's forge, the great machines never slept. Steel screamed as new hulls were forged. Plasma welders etched names of vengeance onto the frames of warships. Retribution, Vindicator, Ghostfire, Nightfall, Redemption. Cargo cranes moved like titans of old, lifting engines the size of city blocks into position. Engineers barked commands. Technicians worked double shifts without pause. No one complained. Not after New Denver. Claire Brooks stood at the edge of the command balcony, staring through a reinforced viewport at the assembly lines below. Her hands were black with oil. She hadn't slept in 30 hours. She didn't care. "We're ahead of schedule," her logistics officer reported, voice gravelly from recycled air. 212 destroyers in queue, 50 dreadnoughts. And we've got enough reserves for another 100 if High Command authorizes Project Aegis. "They will," Claire said, without turning. "They'll need everything." She remembered the faces. She remembered the footage of Amy and Sophie Carter huddled in that shelter, the look in Lisa's eyes as the dome burned. She had 2 children of her own, one at a lunar academy, one still in gestation in a low-grav pod. They would never see what she saw that day, but she would make damn sure they'd grow up safe. "We don't just build ships anymore," she whispered to no one. "We build consequences." In orbit above Jupiter, the fleet known as Iron Sky began to form. Captain Tony Rogers stood on the bridge of the UTS Retribution, his flagship. It was still fresh from the dry dock, weld lines barely cool, armor plating not yet painted. But its weapons were operational. And that was all he needed. "All vessels report ready, sir," said his comms officer. 52 ships in total. Quantum drives primed, shield harmonics stable. Target coordinates loaded. Rogers looked at the screen. The Zephrian patrol had been spotted near Haven's Gate, a border system barely defended, one of humanity's softest outer fringes. It would be their next target, unless he got there first. "Set formation. Full burn," Rogers ordered. "Let's give them a greeting they won't forget." Below the bridge, engineers double-checked antimatter warhead locks. Pilots ran diagnostics on high-G-capable starfighters armed with neural disruptors. Medical teams prepped trauma bays, not for human soldiers, but for Zephrian prisoners. If they took any, on Earth, President Maria Santi stood before the United Terran Assembly. The chamber had not been this full in over a century. Delegates from every world, every colony, every orbital station sat in stunned silence as she began to speak. They came without warning. They came without mercy. They murdered our children, our doctors, our miners, our teachers. They slaughtered families in their homes and laughed as our cities burned. A murmur of rage rippled through the chamber, and now they will learn. She continued, her voice rising like a storm, that humanity does not break. We do not cower. We endure. And when pushed too far, we respond with force the stars themselves will remember. She raised her hand, and the great holoscreen behind her flickered to life. It showed fleets assembling, weapons igniting, worlds that had once been peaceful now bristling with readiness. This is not just about revenge. This is about survival. If we fall, every free species in the galaxy will follow, So we will stand, we will fight, and we will finish this. On Luna, Director Kevin Walsh moved through the intelligence tower, surrounded by screens, analysts, and the brightest minds in Terran espionage. He coordinated the signals from deep field probes, decrypted alien comms, cross-referenced genetic scans, and tracked Zephrian fleet movements. He pointed at the central map. Here, he said to his team, they'll strike next here. The analysts moved without hesitation. Zephrian movements were no longer theoretical. Humanity had seen how they operated swift planetary raids, extermination-level tactics, immediate terraforming. But now humanity could predict them, and more importantly, ambush them. Walsh stepped into the shadows of the operations vault, his mind already working on Phase 2, psychological disruption. If the Zephrians thought they understood war, it was time they learned what it looked like when waged by a species that had clawed its way out of caves and into the stars with nothing but fire and fury. Let's make them afraid, he said. Softly. At Terran Research Command, Dr. Sam Turner stood in front of a secured weapons vault. Behind him, a dozen reinforced containment chambers buzzed with unholy energy, each one housing a weapon once deemed too dangerous to use. Now those restrictions were gone. We deploy everything, he told his teams. No more hesitation. The Zephrians are biological organisms. Their ships, their tech, it's all living tissue. We'll tailor our weapons to that. Neural disruption, genetic corrosion, anti-cellular collapse fields. One of the researchers hesitated. Sir, these systems weren't just untested. Some of them could kill a planet? Turner finished. Good, because that's the mission now. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belt, Commander Nick Taylor's Ghost Squadron prepped for launch. Their stealth ship, Phantom V, was cloaked and silent, tucked beneath a drifting rock the size of Manhattan. Taylor stood before his team. Each one had received enhancements, reflex augmentation, optical enhancements, subdermal armor. They were ghosts in human form. We have one goal, Taylor said. Find the survivors of New Denver. If they're still alive, we bring them back. If they're dead, we make sure the bastards who did it wish they were too. Sergeant Kate Williams, the squad's tech specialist, nodded. Scans show biosignatures near the original colony site. Faint. Deep underground. If anyone's alive down there, they've been breathing poison for days. Then we move fast, Taylor said. Load up. We go in silent. We come out with intel, bodies, or both. As Phantom V vanished into the void, streaking toward the scarred remains of New Denver, Taylor felt a weight settle in his chest. Not fear, not guilt. Something older, something cold. They had crossed into human space. They had killed without cause. And now, the ghosts were coming. Space above Havens. Gates shimmered like disturbed glass as the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light transit. 52 warships formed up in a diamond formation, their hulls still gleaming with the weld scars of fresh manufacture. Engines cooled from superluminal burn, venting plasma into the black. The lead ship, the UTS Retribution, floated at the formation's heart like a predator, silent and hungry. On the bridge, Captain Tony Rogers stood at attention. Status, he said, his voice clipped. All systems green, replied Lieutenant Sarah Monroe, his tactical officer. Weapons charged. Quantum displacement drive cooling. Full readiness across the line. Rogers nodded. Enemy? Monroe pointed to the tactical screen. Incoming. 47 alien signatures. Vectoring from the outer edge of the Havens Gate system. Zephrian bioships. Large, moving in tight formation. Rogers narrowed his eyes. The moment had arrived. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a drill. This was the first direct confrontation between human military might and the invaders who had massacred New Denver. Sound battle stations, Rogers ordered. Across the fleet, klaxons howled. Armored bulkheads slid into place. Pilots climbed into starfighters. Engineers sealed reactor cores. In hangar bays and launch tubes, every Terran soldier, every crewman, every gunner moved with one thought carved into their bones. This is for the 50,000. On the alien side, the Zephrian patrol commander clicked his mandibles in mild amusement. The human vessels had arrived faster than expected. No matter. Their designs were crude, their heat signatures messy, their weapons likely primitive compared to biocannons and molecular SLICERS. To the Zephrians, this was just another purge. Transmitted across open space, human ships. The translated message echoed aboard every bridge. You have entered territory claimed by the Zephrian Hegemony. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Captain Rogers stood still for a beat. Then, he gave a single, simple order. Fire. The human fleet opened up with a fury born of extinction. Kinetic railguns launched solid slugs at a third the speed of light tungsten rods, accelerated until they glowed white from friction. Plasma lances streaked through vacuum, turning blue before impact. Cluster torpedoes deployed in diamond formations, using smart AI to track the weak points in Zephrian armor. The first bioship shattered on impact. The second exploded as its core ruptured, leaking glowing organic fluid into space like blood spilled. In zero gravity, the third attempted to regenerate, but too late. A second kinetic strike ripped through its neural sac, severing the vessel's command tissues. It spasmed, drifted, and died. The Zephrian commander screamed in shock. This wasn't expected. This wasn't possible. These ships were supposed to be weak. The humans were supposed to die quickly. Instead, they moved with precision. Like predators, return. Fire. The commander screeched. Bioweapons launched living missiles that screamed as they accelerated, spiraling toward the human ships in bone-white streaks. But the Terran fleet had studied these. Weapons countermeasures deployed, nanoswarm. Interceptors shredded the organic projectiles before impact. Shield arrays refracted kinetic tissue. Some missiles hit and found themselves chewing on ablative plating laced with acid-neutralizing agents. The damage was minimal. On the Retribution, Lieutenant Monroe's voice rang out. Enemy fleet coordination is weakening. Orders? Rogers clenched a fist. Bring in the ghosts. From the flanks of the formation, a second wave of Terran vessels decloaked. Stealth destroyers. Human ships that had phased into high-dimensional space during the initial skirmish. Invisible to standard sensors. Invisible to Zephrian biology. Now. They reappeared behind enemy lines. Captain Alex Foster of the UTS Spectre led the assault. Target command vessels, he said calmly. Decapitation strike. His squadron fired kinetic charges that pierced through the soft backs of bioships like scalpels through meat. Within seconds, Zephrian coordination collapsed. Tactical screams filled their comms as subordinate captains died in their vessels, severed from their fleet minds. Their weapons turned chaotic. Their formation dissolved. That was when the Terran fighters launched. Lieutenant Commander Rachel. Green squadrons had trained for this moment in war sims designed by the AI war colleges on Europa. Her fighters were small, agile, and death incarnate. Wraith Squadron, form on me, she said. Priority targets, neural clusters. Let's scramble some minds. They dove in, weaving between the massive Zephrian ships, dodging biological defense tendrils, slipping past heat-based tracking. They fired neurodisruptor missiles that pulsed in ultra-frequency bands. The projectiles didn't just explode, they induced seizures in the bioships, locking muscles, overloading sensory pathways, causing them to convulse and stall. One alien vessel turned in a panic only to collide with another, both of them spiraling into a fireball that lit up the void dot in less than 18 minutes. It was over. The entire Zephrian patrol was gone. 47 ships annihilated. Not a single human vessel lost. On the bridge of the Retribution, silence reigned. "Report," Rogers said. "No survivors," Monroe confirmed. "Enemy completely neutralized." He stepped toward the viewports. Beyond the shattered remnants of the alien fleet, the stars burned on silent witnesses to humanity's first victory. "Transmit full battle footage to Fleet Command," Rogers ordered. "Include performance logs. Let them know exactly how fast they died." He turned to face his crew and let every Terran world know this. New Denver wasn't the beginning of our end. It was the beginning of theirs. As the fleet turned and set course back toward rendezvous with the core, the message pulsed outward across systems, colonies, networks, and outposts. Humanity had drawn blood, and the stars would never be quiet again. They came with fire. 500 Zephrian bioships descended upon Armstrong's Pride, humanity's largest industrial world, with the arrogant certainty of a conquering horde. It was the greatest military formation the Zephrian Hegemony had ever assembled, an organic armada that had devoured 12 star systems, broken a dozen civilizations, and never known defeat. The Zephrian flagship, harbinger of high flame, led the formation. From its translucent bridge, War Prime Kethval surveyed the approaching world, a jagged gray and steel sphere wrapped in shipyards, glowing furnaces, and artificial rings. He clicked his mandibles, smug. "This is where they build their weapons," he announced to his commanders. "Destroy it, and we sever the spine of their war machine." He had seen the reports from Haven's Gate ships lost, squadrons eliminated, but he dismissed it as tactical trickery. An ambush, a lucky strike, humans, he believed, could not match Zephrian evolution. They were mammals, soft, scattered. They would panic once their industrial lifeline was severed. But what Kethval did not know, what his spies had failed to learn, was that Armstrong's Pride was not unprepared, that it was a trap, orbiting above. The world in formation tighter than atoms under pressure was the most advanced war fleet ever forged by human hands. Admiral Susan Parker stood on the bridge of the UTS Apocalypse, the first of its kind, a planet-killer dreadnought. It bristled with weaponry that defied known physics. Armor plating 4 meters thick, a reactor that could power a starport for a century, and at its heart, a quantum-fused singularity cannon capable of collapsing space around a target into oblivion. "Enemy fleet entering strike range," reported her XO. "FTL signatures confirmed. 500 bioships. War configuration." Parker nodded, slow and steady. Her fingers tapped once on the steel railing. Just as planned. Around her, the fleet activated their quantum displacement drives, an experimental leap tech that allowed ships to flicker in and out of space-time, rendering them almost impossible to hit. Stealth destroyers shimmered into view from the dark side of Armstrong's third moon. Swarm fighters deployed in silence. 500 Zephrian ships entered a system they believed was UNDED. They had entered hell. Fire at will. Parker ordered. The first wave of human firepower was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Antimatter torpedoes phased through space, blinking into existence inside Zephrian ships and detonating with the force of collapsing stars. Dozens of biovessels were vaporized before they could activate shields. Alien screams filled comm channels as their minds were linked in hive resonance, dying together in waves of psychic agony. Captain Alex Foster's stealth destroyers tore through the Zephrian formation like surgical knives, firing in silence. They targeted command nodes, Those strange, glowing sacs where Zephrian captains lived hardwired into their ships. Foster's team eliminated 12 leadership vessels in 60 seconds. "Headshot protocol complete," he transmitted. "Their brain is bleeding." In the chaos, Lieutenant Commander Rachel Green's fighter wings dropped into the fray. Her squadrons were armed with neural cascade warheads, tuned to exploit the Zephrian ship's biosignal coordination. "Hit their nervous systems," she told her pilots. "Shut down their hive." Her ships moved like phantoms flickering through enemy formations, unloading volleys of data-corrupting viral payloads. Entire squadrons of Zephrian fighters stopped moving mid-flight. Their wings twisted, spasmed, and fell like burnt insects back on the apocalypse. Admiral Parker watched the chaos unfold with brutal clarity. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. In orbit, specialized human vessels opened their bay doors and unleashed the single most horrifying weapon ever deployed in the history of the Terran Defense Force, the nanobotic swarm. Billions of microscopic machines engineered to consume organic material flooded the void like a silver mist. They latched onto the bioships, infiltrating their membranes, multiplying exponentially as they dissolved armor, structure, and crew alike. On the harbinger of high flame, War Prime Kethful screamed as the walls around him melted. "What is this? What have they done?" His command crew collapsed, their exoskeletons splitting from within as nanits bored through their bodies. "Our ships are dying." One screamed before dissolving into vapor. Kethful tried to transmit for reinforcements, but the neural link was gone. His ship, his fleet, his empire was disintegrating around him. This isn't war," he rasped. "This is extinction." On the surface of Armstrong's Pride, Colonel Lisa Morgan led human ground forces equipped with next-gen powered combat armor. When Zephrian drop capsules made it to the surface, they found themselves facing soldiers who moved like walking tanks immune to small arms fire, capable of leaping 50 meters, armed with magnetic rail launchers and anti-bio grenades. "No prisoners," Morgan said. "Not unless they beg. Not unless they surrender. And even then, remind them why we're here." The alien ground assault lasted exactly 42 minutes. By the end of it, human soldiers were dragging Zephrian bodies into the dirt to make room for temporary command towers. Above, Admiral Parker gave the final order: "Bring the apocalypse." Online, charge the core. Deep in the ship's heart, the Singularity cannon powered up, tearing a scar in space-time itself. She aimed it not at the Zephrians, but at the void behind them. Warning to the stars, the weapon fired, and space itself screamed. The last Zephrian ships tried to flee, but stealth frigates hunted them down. No one escaped. War Prime Kethful's ship was crippled and captured to be interrogated under Terran intelligence protocols. His command crew was not so lucky. In less than 6 hours, the greatest fleet the Zephrian Hegemony had ever launched ceased to exist. Back on Luna, Admiral Charles Bennett received the battle report. No human ships lost, no human deaths. 500 alien warships annihilated. Thousands captured. Hundreds of hours of tactical footage logged. He turned to Director Walsh. "They saw what we're capable of now." Walsh nodded. "And they're terrified." Bennett stood before the war map. "All commanders, prepare Phase 2. Simultaneous. Strikes on 12 Zephrian worlds. Burn the Empire from the inside out." From the ashes of New Denver, a monster had risen. It had a name, and that name was humanity. 12 human fleets entered Zephrian space at the same moment. Across the stars, entire systems lit up with red alerts. The skies above a dozen Zephrian worlds turned dark as ships arrived in synchronized bursts of faster-than-light thunder. These were not scouting parties, not warnings. This was the hammer of a species that had made a decision. The Zephrian Hegemony would end today. At the heart of the invasion, Admiral Charles Bennett stood aboard the UTS Judgment, his eyes locked on the largest target, Zeekeler, the Zephrian capital. A world that had ruled an empire through terror for 3 centuries. A world that had ordered the extermination of New Denver without hesitation. Now it faced the wrath of the species it had underestimated. Bennett opened a direct transmission. On all channels, broadcasting to the world below, this is Admiral Charles Bennett of the Terran Defense Force. Your species committed genocide. You crossed into human territory. This is the consequence. Silence followed. Then, from deep beneath the Zephrian capital's crust, a reply came. War Prime Kethful, newly self-declared Supreme Commander, transmitted from a subterranean command bunker carved into the core of a dying mountain. "We offer surrender," he rasped. His voice was weak, broken. "We will withdraw from all human space. We will pay reparations. Please, show mercy to our civilians." The response did not come from Bennett. It came from Commander Beth Phillips, daughter of Captain Roy Phillips, who had died transmitting the first warning from New Denver. She now commanded Strike Squadron Revenant, leading the assault wings circling above the Zephrian capital like vultures. Above a corpse, her voice cut through the silence. "You showed no mercy to our children." A pause. "You chose extermination over diplomacy." Another pause. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of." She leaned toward the mic and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Now face the consequences." The orbital bombardment began. Human. Fleets deployed gravity manipulation weapons that twisted space and crushed orbital defenses as if they were paper. Antimatter detonators exploded in the upper atmosphere, vaporizing Zephrian military installations in blooms of blue fire. Massive city-spanning structures grown, not built, burned with sickly green light as molecular destabilizers tore there. Bioarchitecture apart. Planetary crustal burrowers punched through defensive bunkers, delivering precision warheads deep into the crust. The ground shook as if the planet itself wanted to die. Beneath the carnage, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood aboard a medical command vessel in high orbit, monitoring civilian casualties. She watched the destruction with clinical detachment, recording everything. She had tended to screaming children in underground shelters. She had held hands as people died. Now she saw the faces of the enemy die in turn. Her aide approached. "Ma'am, we've cleared the priority targets. Final stage?" Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Transmit the surgical plague." Engineered viruses, tuned to Zephrian physiology, were released into select structures designed to disable infrastructure, not torture civilians. The message was clear. This wasn't just annihilation. It was calculated, targeted, civilizational. Erasure. On other Zephrian worlds, Kethmer, Shadrin, Hive Fortress Vale, similar scenes unfolded. Captain Tony Rogers leveled Kethmer, the Zephrian Military Academy, in a single coordinated strike. "No more commanders," he said. "Not ever again." Commander Nick Taylor's Ghost Squadron hunted down Zephrian war criminals hiding in underground shelters. They found slavers, torturers, genocidal planners, and gave them no quarter. Slave camps across Zephrian space were liberated. Hundreds of alien species long thought extinct emerged from darkness and bowed in thanks to the humans who now wielded the weapons of gods. In orbit above Zekeler, Admiral Bennett waited. Reports flowed in. 12 Zephrian worlds. All taken, all crushed. None escaped. His comm officer turned. "Sir, confirmation. The hegemony is gone. We've swept their last fleets. Their empire no longer exists." Bennett stared at the map. The lights that had once marked Zephrian power were now gone. Signal ceasefire, he said quietly. Stand down weapons. Begin post-op analysis. Then he walked to the observation deck and stared down at the burning planet below. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to exhale. 6 months later, the galaxy had changed. Where once the Zephrian Hegemony had stretched across 12 systems, now there was only silence and human flags. The surviving Zephrians, now stripped of weapons, were forced to rebuild what they had destroyed. They worked in human mines, cleaned human habitats, rebuilt what they had once burned. Overseen by Governor Jake Morrison, a former miner who had lost his entire family on New Denver and survived the shelters. They wanted to see what humans were capable of. Morrison said to his new staff, "Now they know." Claire Brooks, overseeing reconstruction across former Zephrian worlds, led efforts to build new human settlements. Her structures weren't just shelters, they were monuments, markers of endurance. "We build to last," she told her engineers. "And we build where our enemies once ruled, so they never forget." Dr. Sam Turner deployed dozens of research bases to study the alien tech, but more importantly, to advance humanity's own capabilities. The war had accelerated Terran science by decades. Now they stood as the most dangerous civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Turner warned his staff. The Zephrians weren't the only threat out there. "We won this war, but the next one could be worse. Be ready." On Luna, Admiral Bennett delivered the speech that would echo through history. Broadcast across 200 worlds, it became known as the Never Again Doctrine. Let this be clear. Humanity does not seek conquest. But we will never again suffer the loss of our people in silence. To any species that considers attacking our children, understand this. We will answer, without hesitation, without mercy, and without survivors. Lisa Carter and her daughters, Amy and Sophie, now lived on a rebuilt world called New Dawn, founded from the ashes of New Denver. They attended the memorial every year. They walked among the names of the fallen etched in obsidian. 50,000 voices remembered, not just mourned, but avenged. Sophie held her mother's hand. "Will the bad aliens come back?" Lisa looked down at her daughter and gave a small, sad smile. "No, sweetheart. They learned what happens when you cross the line into human territory." In the far reaches of the galaxy, where strange empires watched from behind veils of caution and curiosity, the stories spread of humans, of how they were underestimated, of how, when provoked, they became something unstoppable. Trade delegations arrived, trembling with tribute. New alliances were offered not out of kindness, but fear. The phrase became standard in diplomatic transmissions. "We come in peace. We offer friendship. We do not challenge the humans." For they had learned a terrible truth: humanity does not conquer, they end.